Who would like to go first? Let's have a brave volunteer.
I'm Damien McGlynn, and I'm Digital Officer for Artist Rooms, and you've all heard plenty about Artist Rooms today. So we covered a lot, I think. Yeah, we talked a lot about, our question is, what are the opportunities for you to develop the use of digital technologies and platforms in the future? So we talked a lot about platforms and touching on some of the stuff that came up this morning about reliance on major platforms and how that may be a bad thing and moving to new platforms, but then also the importance of not trying to create your own networks and platforms when your audience is already active somewhere else, and that you should use what's available and go to that. But we kind of talked quite a bit about platforms for a while, and then we sort of came to the conclusion that with these developments and with what we've all learned in recent years, people are starting to come to the conclusion that it's more important to value the content over the platform. And we think that may change how people work on their digital projects in the future. So it won't be so focused on where you're doing it, but what you're doing. Then, yeah, we talked about, again, sort of related to platforms, but moving towards using digital as the experience and not just as a promotional tool, which is definitely how a lot of arts organizations have been using digital, just seeing it as a kind of a broadcast mechanism, and that we think, again, after a few years of behaving like that, people are starting to realize that the digital can be the experience, and we have a lot of learning staff in our group and talking about how they definitely see it differently from colleagues who would see it as marketing or information for visitors, whereas when you're coming at it from a learning perspective, you think this should be used to deliver what you want to do with your public, rather than just tell them about how they can come to the building to experience it. And our third one was about how some of the new technology and things like that we saw are opening up the idea of how digital artworks or digital output can be physical objects or experiences within a gallery and not necessarily existing online or on a screen, which is sort of how people have imagined digital projects. They exist on websites, but we're moving more to something that might be more experiential within physical space.
Thanks very much. So, panel. So we're talking here about taking the digital to the audience, and I suppose there's a really interesting question here. Do you think people get that digital is not just about promotion, it's not just about marketing, it can be about real learning and engagement?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, of course you can. Bridget.
I think that everyone does actually, even marketing people, really believe in deep engagement. I think that the problem comes in knowing the fine qualities in how to do it, and in sharing across departments how to do it, and really exploring in experimental ways. You know, marketing would be perhaps more effective if it was going much deeper into meanings around a work and enabling people to make their own meanings. It's just quite difficult to do that, which is why education professionals are so valuable. But it just doesn't, it's quite hard to translate that into the kind of marketing arena. Does that make sense? Does that accord with your experience? Yeah.
And this point is probably a good one for Sian, actually, around taking digital to the audience. You talked a lot about MOOCs, and do you feel that was taking the digital learning to the audience, or did you think they had to come to you? How did you go about that?
Well, I suppose in pragmatic marketing terms, we didn't really do anything. I mean, we tweeted it once or twice, but I think because it was based on a big, high-profile platform, people just came to that platform. I suppose for me, the question ties into the question that came up this morning, actually, which is about the digital becoming invisible, because I think it's starting to feel a bit kind of almost archaic talking in terms of the digital, isn't it? I mean, I know colleagues that are now speaking in terms of the post-digital, which is the sense that actually what matters isn't the form, isn't whether it's digital or not. It's the kinds of meanings that can circulate through. It's a kind of it's a question of meaning. It's not a question of whether it's digital or not. So I think that's really important. I mean, I think MOOCs aren't just digital learning. They're learning, and they're embedded in people's lives in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, that's a good question.
And Kieron, there's an interesting point that came up here about different technologies and using different things to get to audience with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a couple of things, actually. So I had a couple of thoughts that I wrote down there. So first of all, I think the just thing here is about practice. So, I've done a lot of work with youth engagement people around, because I used to do it myself, around you would never expect young people to come to you. If you wanted to work with them effectively, you try and go to the spaces that they're occupying, and we just still, for some reason, don't do that online. And my other point is around this fusion of the online and offline, in the essence that it's just your practice. And we talk about digital, the affordances of digital being for marketing. That's just because they've thought about it quite a lot and thought about how digital is good for marketing. We just haven't had the space and sometimes capacity, to be fair, about thinking about how we use it effectively in our work. It's just a tool to do that, right? The other quick point then is around the physical engagement and the technologies. So there's a really great John Davey, don't know if you know him, he works over in Bristol. He's got a really awesome point that he made, that he's like, we spent the last 20 years making a virtual web. We're going to spend the next 20 years making it physical, which is totally true, right? That's what we're doing. We're physicalizing the web right now, and that's what I think we have to be aware of, that all that stuff we were worried about, it being digital and being removed from us, and all that kind of stuff that made us slightly reluctant to engage with it. We're kind of getting over that now, because it is a tactile now. It is a tactile engagement. Yeah, wearable technologies. It's one of the biggest growing industries in technology at the moment. You can wear cool stuff, and that it's technology based. So I think we really need to be aware of that physical raft that's coming towards us.
Yeah, it was an interesting point that Sian made around digital's kind of a bit old hat now. It needs to be part of everything we do. And at the Opera House, we're at the beginning of writing our next digital strategy. And one of the things we set out from the beginning is we want it to be our last, because we want digital in the future to be part of everything we do. It's just every day, and we stop calling it that anymore. Has anybody got any more questions or comments, either for the panel or for that group, on this question? Yeah.
Rebecca Sinker Tate. Sorry, that sounded double-barrelled. Rebecca Sinker Tate. Just a comment, I think, about the using when and how digital is good for learning. I think we're still interrogating this, and I think there are learning theories out there that we should revisit in the context of what it is that we're doing digitally. I don't know that new theories of learning need to be invented. I just think we need to reflect our practice or refract our practice through those theories. And this is me sort of putting in a plea to not gallop as fast as the technological changes seem to impel us to do, but to step aside and slow down a bit and reflect a bit, I think, in order to understand what we're doing before we're pushed on to the next thing. And this is from someone working in an organisation that positively gallops all of the time. So to be able to find those spaces and to argue for those spaces so that we can really get a better understanding of what it is we're doing and the pedagogic impact of that and the learner experience, I think that's got to be as important as the trying new stuff out, just sort of understanding what happens when we do that, including when we fail. I think we learn most when we fail.
So your question and your feedback.
The question was, what are the special qualities digital technologies offer you? I've sort of come up with two and a third cautionary one. It's, ease of creative production and enabling of connections and links across geographical, cultural spaces, and often unexpected connections. And then a third cautionary one is, it sort of links to what's just been said actually, caution about the world we're creating through prolonged use of digital technologies. And some caution about that.
So a few cautions there. Any thoughts from
cautions.
Kieron, can I come in on that? We talk about digital technology. I think it's really worth thinking about technology. Digital technology is just a form of technology, and technology is a pencil. as much as it's anything else. So we're in a continuous engagement with technologies. Do you know what I mean? Digital or not, and we need to think about how all of those, I think, reflect on our lives. I think it's a really important thing that we don't separate digital, because it speaks to the last point as well. If we don't separate digital from anything else, it's just another technology.
The council has lasted a long time. I'm not sure certain digital technologies last as long as they have. I mean, the movement of it.
Yeah, it's going very fast. But yeah, for sure, I'm not going to argue with that. I just think it's important that we don't think about digital technologies as a separate thing to technology. It's got separate affordances, but we're continuously wrapped in a process of technological change. The classic, oft-used example is the printing press, which there was massive resistance to the printing press as much as there was with the web. And it's saying, well, actually, what does this allow us to do, and what does it not allow us to do? And it's just understanding the affordances of how it helps or not.
Well, it's a new media, an old new media.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say something? I think there's a tension there in that we tend to think about technology in instrumental terms, and I think that can be a real problem for us. We think about, in the context of education, how technology can help us achieve a pre-existing educational goal more efficiently or more effectively. We don't tend to think the other way. How is technology changing, for example, the pedagogical possibilities that we have open to us? And I think that's a real problem, and I think that tension came through in the 3 points you raised. 2 were about how can technology help us do things better, be more creative. The final one was, but what kind of a world is the technology forming for us? So I think as educators, it's really important to keep that balance between instrumentality and a kind of a bigger sense of how technology changes us.
Bridget, do you want anything?
Yeah, I agree with that. Can I just refer back to what Rebecca said, even though it slightly bypasses what you've just said? This question about the fact that there are these learning theories that have existed for a long time. I think it's true, but there are certain theories such as paragogic practice, praxis-based learning, heutagogy. They have all been around for a long time, but they've been around in academia. And they've not really existed in educational mainstream practice, but it's actually digital technology that's enabling these theories to come to the fore, to be practiced. So the task is to manage it in a way that doesn't just generate a kind of surfeit. You talked about the ease of creative production. There is a slight possibility that we might just generate a surfeit of peer communication. That's great, I like it, and just tons and tons of data. So it's really important to ensure that we have that we're developing critical faculties throughout this process.
Kieron? Can I raise one more thing to that list, which I think is really important? Totally on the behaviour, how design shapes our behaviour, and that's something we're really not aware of enough with digital technology. How the way you use Facebook shapes your interactions with your friends. That's a really important thing that we need to be aware of. Sorry, but the point I was going to make is completely on my head because I went on something else. Oh yeah, data. So you picked up on this as well. Data-driven stuff, that is one thing that we get out of digital technology that we don't get out of other things, which is an incredible amount of data about how things are operating, how things are using them. As educators, that excites me tremendously because it means I can understand what's going on a lot more than I ever could before. That I think is a really cool thing to think about.
Yeah, I think that to add to your cautions, there's a caution around using technology, firstly, for the sake of using technology. That's a bit rich coming from a technologist. But also about trying to replicate the real world in technology is not always the best way to go about things. And a really good example is our border control at our airports. So the government or the border control put out a tender and they said, we want electronic border control, where you put your passport in and it takes your picture. So, and the people who wrote the specification basically wrote the specification for technology to replace the human being. So the company that won, some of you may have used them. You walk up, you stand in a queue like you've always stood in a queue. You stand on a little plate and you put your passport down, the same as handing it to a person. It scans your face and it decides whether your face looks like your picture and then it lets you in, just like the person does. That doesn't improve the experience of the audience involved whatsoever. It's just the same long queue. It's awful. But technology does exist. It exists today that can tell who you are the moment you step off the plane. No queues, green light, straight through. But that didn't win the tender because it didn't meet the specification because people were trying to replace the real world with technology, and we need to think outside of the box a bit more fourth dimension. because of time, let's go to the next group.
Hello, I'm Lydia from First Sight. I'm a marketing assistant, but I sort of tagged along with our learning team today. So our question was the same as theirs. What special qualities do digital technologies offer you? We started off with accessibility, saying it's more accessible for people around the world to interact, but also for people with visual impairments or hard of hearing. It gives people a voice and space to present their work, for example, freelancers, and you can experiment and test. You can upload things onto the web, and then if it doesn't work as well as you want, you can remove them. It gives a sense of democracy and choice, and idea sharing and empowerment for people, and allows networking connections to form with people or ideas that would not necessarily or couldn't necessarily cross paths. And that's it.
So, experimenting, testing. The internet's very mix and burn sometimes, isn't it? Twitter's posts are in there 1 second, gone the next. Does anybody want to comment on any of that? Sian?
I like that you said it gives a sense of democracy rather than it actually gives democracy. Because I think that's right. When you look sort of deeper into some of the discourses that are circulating around, for example, MOOCs, I've got a PhD student at the moment who's looking at the ways that MOOCs, institutions who are doing MOOCs, market themselves. So you see all these Ivy League universities marketing their MOOCs through representations of their kind of real estate, their buildings, their quads, their trees, their libraries. In essence, what they're doing is saying you can do a MOOC, and you too can have this little sort of chink of the Ivy League experience. But actually, they're not going to be able to access or will ever be able to access an Ivy League university. So, in that sense, you can see the democratic kind of discourse acting as a kind of facade over what's actually going on in terms of access to higher education. So, yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Sarah Castle, about to take up a post at the Museum of London, currently King's College London, so a future Learn partner over there with Sian. So we're not quite sure, we might have gone a bit off the track with our question, but I'll just say what we said. So ours was the same as the first group, which is what are the opportunities for you to develop the use of digital technologies and platforms in the future? We thought there was an opportunity for greater collaborations between museums and galleries, not just within your own individual institution. We thought galleries and museums could act as universities. There was an opportunity there. We thought there was a lot of opportunity around outputs, so to create something to take from like individual learning and participation sort of sessions. Another opportunity for people to make stuff, we thought, and also an opportunity around showing things which there just simply isn't room to display, so storeroom items which would never see the light of day otherwise. So not sure if that was really on task or not, but we had a nice chat, so that was good.
Yeah, just quickly to respond to the idea of digital offering you more of an opportunity for output. I think that's great, and I think it's true. But I think equally it offers an opportunity for more input. And so, I think maybe you should think about a kind of balanced approach where in generating more output, you're always thinking, how can I pull in more feedback, pull in more contributions, and make our institution, therefore, more participatory, more two-way. So just a general principle there, really.
Why do we think we're using digital? Is it to increase the MOOCs is a really good example, the reach. Is it about getting to more people? Is it about the kind of the intrigue and the wonderful things like the conductive plasticine? Because I just wonder, why are we using digital? Are we using it just because it's there?
Yeah, I think for me that's a really big issue that we need to critically engage with, and it's coming out from the discussions that I would imagine had today, which is around I use the word affordances a lot, which is a horrible word, but it's like, what can it do for us, yeah, that something else can't? So you can have a certain conversation, you can have a workshop. Well, I used to work at the Globe, right? So you'd have like workshops all the time, face to face in the Globe space. Yeah, and there's a real kind of principle behind that, which is great, because you're entering a building and there's loads of stuff that goes along with that. So there's certain things you can't replicate outside of that space. So you've got to think about what is it that digital enables me to do otherwise. Like you said, access to service, that's a huge thing. Mass engagement with people on a kind of level, that's another thing. It's just really understanding what it's good for.
Do you think it inspires creativity or hampers it?
I think that's like saying, does paint inspire creativity,
Right,
it can do, or it can just make your room look a bit better. you know. Yeah, so but that for me is like an instrumental thing as well. Like it allows us to do stuff. Like so, you know, if you come across Moore's law, so Moore's law is the amount of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years. Basically what that means is the computer you buy today, like 2 years time will be like half as much or thereabouts. Yeah, so basically things getting cheaper. So it allows you access to this high-end kind of quality stuff. But for me, it's that difference about how are you rethinking, how is it enabling you to do things in a different way? And you can't do that without really critically engaging with the tools you have at your disposal. So new forms of art that are digitally enabled, that's really exciting.
I think it's a misplaced question, actually. Because I don't think we use the digital. We kind of are the digital, aren't we? It's more. Again, it's back to that question of instrumentality. But
We are the digital. Sian lives in Tron. Our last group, is that right? Yep, go for it.
Hello, I'm Hannah Cox from South Bank Centre in the education team. We also had what special qualities do digital technologies offer you? So I'm going to try and pick out some things that haven't been said already. So one of the things I looked at was the possibility of breaking down complex problems by having lots of people come together and sharing their viewpoints, and also driving ongoing interest. So if we've got things existing digitally, then we've got the possibility to have online archives or online I've completely forgotten the word I need, but things that you can access and learn about, and that gives people more of a chance to have a long-term relationship with their learning, to keep going back, feeding back, and keep those conversations going. We also talked about unknown outcomes. Because of the wider reach, more people coming into contact and extending the possibilities of the conversations, and possibly coming out with some surprising results. And then one of the kind of concerns that came up was the lack of filter that might come with something that's completely open, where anyone can feed in, and then having to possibly trawl through all of that to find what is relevant, what you do want to be learning, maybe quality control in there, that being a good thing and a bad thing.
What is relevant? How do we filter all that out?
By encouraging critical thinking in everybody. I don't think you should always have a single authoritative filter. I think everybody needs to filter together as a community.
I think this is a design question. So one of the things that's most useful that's come for me out of the digital technology world is how you think about design and how you design the shape of experiences. And for me, I think that's really what that question is about for me. So if you had a physical building, you wouldn't just have the doors open all day with no one there to look at how people are coming in or how you structure their engagement with the space. Do you see what I mean? Like, that's something you think about really carefully when you've got a physical building. So we just do the same thing online. We just think about how are people coming to this? How are people getting in? How are they navigating? Do you know what I mean? I think that's actually what it comes down to. We do this weird thing sometimes with digital because we don't know it so well. We forget all the great learning that we've got about the rest of our practice, and we don't apply it. And actually, there's some real massive similarities.
Is there any more comments from the panel? Any questions from the floor? Yes. Can you get us a mic and tell us who you are?
I hope this isn't an inappropriate question, but I work at a private institution, which, we all have to raise money, but we have to raise money. And we have a new CFO, and as of like 2 weeks from now, a new head of finance, both of whom have come from The Guardian. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on learning to see how you can use digital to make money. Not just put everything out there free, but are there ways to make money? MoMA offers, not their Coursera, but MoMA offers a range of courses online that people pay $350 to take, and it's a source of income. Is anybody else dealing with that?
I think, we're struggling with this. We worked on some interactive educational whiteboard packages that we considered maybe something we could sell into the education sector, for example. There's so much free stuff off there, it's very difficult, and everybody expects something for free online. But I think some organisations are more fortunate than others. Take MoMA, for example. It's a massive brand. It's got that credibility and leverage, so it can charge for something. A smaller arts organisation may not be able to do that. And I think we really need to ask ourselves, what are we here for? And when I say we, I mean the education space. Are we here to make money? And I think the answer is no, I don't think it is. I think it's to enrich people's lives and engage in learning and all the other stuff which I'm sure you can articulate a lot better than me.
My immediate reaction was to go, oh God, I don't want to talk about money. But but there are just two possibilities which aren't just about selling products. And one is Brooklyn Art Gallery developed a membership scheme that was online. So, where you're paying, it's a bit like the Guardian Extra scheme, really. So a kind of enhanced membership. And the other thing is just to consider the idea of micropayments. That you don't have to just be looking for those that can spend a lot of money, but looking at ways of generating revenue, maybe using alternative currencies as well.
Kieron.
So yeah, it's a hard question, isn't it? But I've come quite hard on this. It's like a personal thing. So what happens at the Trust is we support quite a lot of sustainable social ventures, that we call them. So social organisations who are trying to be sustainable. Where that comes from for me is I've worked in the charity and public sector all my life. I've been in enough organisations where amazing work has fallen over because the funding's been pulled, and that really annoyed me. And because, so I'm thinking about, well, how can I get around that? And actually, this is just for me, but I think, essentially you need a revenue stream into the organisation. That could be grants, that's a revenue stream as much as anything else is, yeah? It could be anything. There has got to be some sort of business model underpinning it. What we talk about at the Trust is 3 strands of value. We have like a social value, which is what sort of social needs it's trying to address. We've got a user value, which is about saying why would someone choose this product or service over something else? And then we've got a market or economic value, which is essentially who are you paying, who's paying for it, right? And that doesn't have to be the person who's using the service as well. So I sort of think that enables us, and what it has, there's loads of organisations we work with, but you get quite different mixed business models about who's paying for something or not. And there's totally a way to do it. Like you look at the open source movement, this is fueled development, but it's based on giving away stuff for free. Yeah, do you know what I mean? But there's loads of mixed business models. Like WordPress offers you the chance to put a website for free, but they do a lot of consultancy work around it, and they've been going, and they're one of the most, I think they're accountable for a massive percentage of the web traffic. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think there are ways to do it. You just got to think a bit carefully about who are you doing for who.
Yeah, and there's lots of examples. Wikipedia is free but makes money. Yeah, absolutely. Sian, just out of interest, because I don't know, the online education program you talked about, how was that funded?
I suppose our sector is so different from yours in that sense, and that we offer students courses, they pay for them. But
that was free, wasn't it?
That one's free. All the Edinburgh MOOCs are free, unless people want a statement of completion, in which case they can pay a small amount of money. I think it's about £30 or something to get that.
How do you pay for it?
It's centrally funded by the university as a strategic investment. Right. So Edinburgh University has a programme of expansion of digital education, not just MOOCs, but accredited distance education as well. So it's part of a kind of suite of investment in online education. And for the university, it's as much about cultural shift as it is about drawing new bodies of students to the university. So I think it's just a very different picture in higher education. But I think that what MOOCs are really good at is raising profile, and the benefits of that will be probably quite indirect, but it will mean that in the case of the university, your university will be at the forefront of people's minds as an institution which is committed to innovation and digital teaching, and that's a good thing, so it's worthwhile. But yeah.
Of course, I suppose the business case sometimes around education, learning, participation in both the visual arts and the performing arts is about building an audience for the future. So it's a long-term viability and survivability of those art forms and those organisations. So there's that part as well. I know we're nearly out of time. We are out of time. Is there any more questions? For anybody want to add anything? Great. Oh, one more at the side. On the back.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Nikki, a researcher at Tate. I just wondered if you could speak, slightly related to that, about partnership work between museums and galleries and the digital industry. So not just working and using the platforms, but actually collaborating, partnering with those digital companies, so the Googles, the Mozillas that you mentioned, the experience of that kind of work, who's benefiting, what are the motivations for those kind of partnerships?
Okay.
I think it's really important to be very creative in the way that you work with agencies. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that question. But I think there are a lot of exciting projects, but it's important not to be too but to be agile and creative, and to use events like Culture Hack and Hacker Days to get to know creative agencies and to understand them before you get into commercial partnerships. Lots of organisations have spent loads of money being locked into commercial deals. So there are projects like the Curate, Connect, it's got Click, Connect, Curate, Create, which is a project in Leicester, where they're inviting lots of creative agencies to create content, so look at projects like that and see how they work. I wasn't really prepared for that question, sorry.
Okay, we are out of time now.
Yeah.
Neil.
Yes, you have to forgive us. Sian and I have to run to get to Gatwick, to get back to Edinburgh. Just wanted to thank everybody and say that because we're leaving to go to Gatwick, you don't need to leave and finish and stop talking. That was all I wanted to say. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you to everybody on our panel, everybody who's organised today. It's been absolutely brilliant. And please fill in your feedback forms. Thank you very much, everybody.